Today we're looking at another 3D scanner. This is the Moose 3D scanner from 3DMakerPro. Just a quick unboxing. So we've got the scanner, power leads, power brick and a turntable and a little mini tripod. But here's the scanner itself. Very neat little unit. Feels nice in the hand, nicely built. Heavy duty construction, metal case. As I say, you get this little tripod, little mini one, height adjustable as well. It's all you need. You don't need anything more than that really. Also doubles as a handle when hand holding. That's the turntable with its special top if you do a table scan. The first scan I did was this giant helmet shell. And I struggled a bit with this because it needs a bit of practice, this scanner. It's got quite a long working distance and a very shallow depth of field. It took a few passes. As with all 3D scanning, it's not as easy as it looks. You do need to practice to get the best out of scanners, and you might need to do several scans and combine them. But it coped with this pretty well. It's a bit shiny on the underside, which is never great for scanners. And some of the sharper transitions it lost tracking momentarily. But the tracking on the whole was pretty good. But you do have to constantly adjust your distance. Here I'm just going back a bit where it lost tracking on that corner. You can see in the background that anatomy skull. That's my next subject for scanning. Here's the completed scan after processing. There are a few holes in it, and it's not highly detailed, but there's a fair bit of detail there. And certainly there's enough detail that if you're miniaturizing this to print it or something like that, it would be absolutely fine. Well, here's Scully, my plastic anatomy skull, which I used for the next scan, minus the eyeballs. I picked those up at Makers Central. So I'm scanning it from different angles and different heights, and it's picking this up very well. It coped with this nicely. In fact, it was quite an easy scan. You can see I'm getting the turntable in it a bit, but I can cut that out later. I've sped this up a bit. Here I'm using the lasso tool just to get rid of that base. And then I've turned it upside down and I'm scanning it again. That way I get the underside and some different angles. Speeding it up again. And it aligned these scans very well. So this is just the alignment process. And there we are. You can see how well they're aligned by the fact they blend into each other. You then process the scan, which can take a little while, so I've sped this up. And here's the finished scan. And this came out very, very well. It's got some detail. It's not highly detailed. As you can see, it's quite shiny, which would imply there's quite a lot of processing that's gone on. But it's a good scan. It's a usable scan. Then we scan another skull. You can't really see it here, but this is a tiny little rabbit skull that I found. Lots of detail on this, and it is a very small subject. Here we're doing the scan. Green areas are what it's scanning, blue areas are what it's scanned. Just removing the base. And then I've turned it upside down and scanning it again. Changing the angle. Then we combine the two scans, we merge them. And the merge worked well for this one. And there's the finished thing. As you can see, it hasn't picked up a lot of the detail. You've got the basic shape, but it looks kind of melted. You can't see where the teeth join the skull, and there aren't all the holes that are in the sides of the skull. I actually redid this and reprocessed it using different settings to maximize detail. Here you can see there is a lot more detail, but there's also a lot more anomalies or artifacts, these extra bits stuck on the side, these sort of ragged bits on the edges and stuck to the teeth and things. So a bit limited on success with small objects. We then move on to this much larger skull. This is an old sheep skull I found in a field years ago. It's a broken old skull, but lots of detail. So it's another good subject. So I've scanned the top and I've scanned the bottom, and it's combined those. And then processing those. I am speeding this up, as I say, but there's the finished result. Quite shiny again, so it's lost some of the detail, but there is still a fair bit of detail retained. Plenty of holes, it hasn't closed the holes. One of my favourite scanning subjects, Incredible Hulk toy that I picked up at a car boot sale. This is quite a largish object. You can see I'm having to move in and out to keep the scan in focus. And if we process that. So here's the finished scan. It's come out very well. There's a few anomalies and floating islands and a couple of holes, but on the whole it's a pretty good scan, and it was done quite quickly. I also did a scan of my daughter's face. Not a great scan because she wouldn't stay still for very long. She's had to have her eyes shut because it's a blue light scanner, so it's not eye safe and not suitable for using on your pets. But it shows it can do it. This is the Moose 3D scanner from 3DMakerPro. This is the full version. They also do a light version, which is slightly lower cost with lower specification. It's a lovely design. It's got a nice feel to it. Lovely metal case. It's got sort of a nice weight to it. Nice quality. This is billed as an entry-level scanner. It's to replace their mole scanner. And it's got built-in AI to help with tracking to make it easier to use. Not sure about how easy this would be for someone who's new to scanning, for reasons I'll come into in a moment. It's quite a small scanner. The depth cameras are very close together. This is usually found in 3D scanners that are designed for scanning small objects at close range to pick out detail. This is slightly different in that its working distance is quite long comparatively, and so it won't pick out the same level of detail. One of the problems I've encountered with this scanner is it has a very shallow working depth, or depth of field, so you have to keep the scanner within that range of the surface that you're scanning. Not difficult on a cylindrical object on a turntable where everything's relatively the same distance from the scanner, but when you've got odd shaped objects, you've got to move in and out, and you've got to really concentrate on the range to make sure you're within range, because outside that range it simply won't scan. So that does take a lot of practice and can be frustrating at times. That's why I would say it's not the easiest scanner to use for beginners. Don't get me wrong, I got some good scans with this. It's billed as being good for small objects up to, fairly large objects. I think it's 15 millimeters up to 1.5 meters. I've not found that to be the case. It is not great at small objects at all. It has a job sort of finding them on the turntable, and it certainly doesn't pick out the detail in them. It's better suited for something about the size of your fist or a large orange and bigger. That's what I've found anyway. It will scan a human head, but just be aware that this is a blue light scanner, so it's not eye safe. I think the light version has a different system on it. It will scan something the size of a human head, but trying to scan a whole body I think would be very difficult and would produce a very large file size. So really I would say this is best for medium size objects. As I said, with practice I got some very, very good scans. The thing that lets this scanner down is really the software. It could really do with some improvements. I found the software to be quite slow, and it is not intuitive. It's not instantly obvious how to access and use certain functions on it. I found that the merging features on the software were a bit hit and miss. It either merged it really nicely or very badly, and I find the manual merging to be quite tricky because of the way the point clouds are represented. The hole filling function doesn't work terribly well. It doesn't create watertight models, it does leave holes, and I haven't found how you manually fill the holes after processing. I also struggle a bit with the lasso tool. Bear in mind though, I'm using this on a MacBook and I'm using a trackpad. It might be different on a PC and with a mouse. It does produce some very smooth scans, but I think some of this is down to over-processing and loss of detail really. I did try changing the settings to gain as much detail as I could, and it certainly rendered more detail, but it also created anomalies, especially along sharp edges. The software certainly requires a lot of memory. My MacBook has 18 gigs of RAM, and it was struggling at times, especially with some of the bigger scans I did. It could really take a long time. It's the only time I ever hear the fan cut in on my MacBook is when I'm processing on the JM Studio software. I think the minimum software requirement is 16 gigs of RAM, so just take note of that. My overall conclusion is it's a very nicely made scanner. It is certainly capable of some very good scans, but it's quite technique sensitive and it is let down a little bit by the software. But thanks very much for watching. I'll be back soon with some more videos.